move on to the exercise 3.01. So guess what? I'm going to ask you to do this. I'm going to ask you to engage in the practices of tagging, transcoding, templating, listing, and linking. I'm going to ask you to engage in the practice of tagging, and here I've given some slightly different definition, by associating objects with other objects, because if you think about it, what tags do is they just say these two things are like each other, they're associated with each other. I'm going to ask you to transclude by displaying different parts of objects. I'm going to ask you to template by displaying objects in structured patterns, and to list sets of objects, and to link, provide navigation. So without looking at those directions, and I'm just going to put them to the side, I'll just do it. Actually, does somebody else want to do this? I'll start it, and you can follow, and when you're ready to come up with it on your own, you can follow. So let's look at news.google.com. Okay. Who sees tiddlers? What's the tiddler?
Block of news that's got links to other.
A little white square, white rectangle? That's a tiddler. Think of that as a tiddler. And we're going to build that. So how do we do it?
Well, first we'll probably want to make tiddlers out of all those links.
So that's a link. That's a link. That's a link. That's one. And that's one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In fact, consistently, if you're on expand mode, you get 5 links. If you're on collapse mode, you get 1. Maybe 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They have rules. This is an interactive hypertext that's been designed, and we're just going to replicate it because it will give you a chance to sort of understand the relationships between their objects. So Steve says he wants to make a tiddler for every story. Okay, so we'll do this second tiddler here. So the title of one tiddler is going to be what? Yeah, so here's, that sounds nasty. I can't, I've had it, I'm not doing that story. We'll do a different one. That's gross. We're not doing, oh God. Here, I like Russian fighter jets. That's like, okay, we'll do Russian fighter jets. I can't do people getting sucked into MRIs. Sorry. Derek, you on this one? Russian fighter jets, this is a tiddler, right? Russian fighter jets. Oops. It's a little annoying. This one, this one, this one. How about this? View full coverage. Is that a tiddler? Yeah. How about this? That would be a tiddler. How about this? Yep. This, this, and this. How about Fox News? Or 6th Fleet Navy.mil or Washington Post. Are those tiddlers as well?
No, they're just tags. Not tiddlers, they're just text.
2 votes so far.
Are there links to other tiddlers?
They're not linkable. You can't click on them. You can't click on Fox News or Washington Post. So what do you mean are they links? Like, did the Google gods provide an opportunity for me to navigate on the basis of that text? No. Okay. So
Aren't they just authors for subtitles?
So you might tag this tiddler with Washington Post. Okay. that would be Ben's idea. Steve, what are you going to do?
I don't know.
Okay. We've learned about two different options. Yeah, Eric?
Did you just write it as a field as office?
You could create a field whose value is Washington Post and whose name is, what would you name the field? Author, source, where it's coming from. Okay. So what are the relative benefits from Eric's approach of using it as a field named source with the value Washington Post and Ben's approach of tagging it Washington Post? Jillian. No. Yes.
Yes, you're right.
Yes.
Can you repeat the question again?
Yep. So what are the relative benefits of Ben's approach of creating a field for this Tiddler Washington Post and Eric's approach of Ben's approach of creating a tag whose value would be Washington Post for the Tiddler and Eric's approach of creating a field called source whose value would be Washington Post?
Well, the tag, I mean, they're both organizational methods, but with his method, it would be if you had several, I would think if you had several things from the Washington Post, you would want to have them all together with that field.
So the tag would accomplish the same thing. The tag would associate a bunch of different Tiddlers from the Washington Post. They'd just be associated on a tag instead of a field. Tags are really just a field of a Tiddler called tags. And we treat them differently. It doesn't create a Tiddler, it creates the opportunity to create a Tiddler. So does a field, and we can show you ways to display fields the way that we display tags. So tags are sort of shortcuts to fields, and they just display differently. So for now, it's up to you. It doesn't really matter. The value of fields is that there's a lot more work you can do with them. So you can, because like if you just tag it Washington Post, you don't know if it's the source or if it's the business. You don't know. But if it, you know, and if it's called some other source, you know, you have more precision using fields. So, so that's up to you. I kind of suggest you do fields on this case instead of tags. So how about this 20 hours ago? How are we going to get that text? Stick it in a field. Okay. Russia. Create a Tiddler called Russia. Create a Tiddler called United States Navy. Called a Tiddler called Fighter Aircraft. Okay. What kind of Tiddler are we going to call Russian fighter jet buzzes U.S. spy plane in Black Sea? What kind of Tiddlers are going to be called Russian fighter plane buzzes, U.S. Navy jet as fears over? What are these Tiddlers going to be called? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those Tiddlers. Yeah, let's tag them with news stories. So using tags to typify, to apply to everything in the Tiddler makes sense. But if there's specific things about a Tiddler, you might use a field. Okay. What are we going to call the Tiddler called view full coverage? What are we going to tag it? What is it? I don't know. I'd call it like navigational stuff or some word like it's, okay. I think these are the same. Maybe this one I'll call expand collapse button, but it's also navigational. This is sort of like navigational text. You can't even click on it. I guess you can. I don't quite understand what that does. I think if you click anywhere, it collapses and expands. So you don't have to worry. I'm not worried about the functionality so much as the organizational structure. So I built this out a little bit. Where's my graphs? There it is. So I took a screenshot last night of this object. Let me see if I can make it bigger. right? So there's the generic object. That's so if you can grab a screenshot of that. So you work with that. And then I messed around with it. So I don't know, do you guys all have screenshot software that you know how to do this with?
I just tried to download it.
Yeah, no, it's not going to let you do it on this computer. Yeah. You can do the default Apple is something, but it doesn't have the drawing. But it's not critical that you do this, but I thought it was a useful teaching tool, so I thought it might be useful exercise for you to gauge into. So I found some orange subject tags. I found some fields, blue fields, that are going to belong to purple tiddlers, which I called story headlines. I've got some green, I'd call that template text. So that text is going to show up in the template. It's not going to show up in my tiddlers. And red navigational things that will also show up in my templates. So breaking down where different things go as an exercise gives you an idea of how to reverse engineer this whole thing. So let's see, what did I do? I created a news story. Here's the Trump shames the Senate, and I actually went there and I grabbed the first like 6 just paragraphs and deleted the stuff that showed up that I don't, you just want something there so it works. In this case, I created some fields. So I created a lead, LEDE is how journalists spell lead, the first part of a story. So I just took the first sentence, I put it in the lead, which you'll see in a bit, even though Google News doesn't do this exactly. I put the source, Fox News, that was Eric's idea. And I put the time an hour ago. It's static. We know that we want the time to be in that, but we don't care. So if you want to figure out how to make the time dynamic, put the date field, the timestamp of when the story was written, and you can mess around with time date, and it's all there in TiddlyWiki. You can render it and count it back from today and go for it. But for now, you can just put text in there. And I tagged it news story. And here's my news panel. So it looks like I get all the things that are listed as a news story. I put the link to the title, I put the source and the time, and I put the lead in there, and that's it. And I make it a link. So even though the Google News doesn't put the lead in there anymore, I thought it would be kind of fun to do that. And you can click on that, and it will take you to the story. I didn't put the story in there because I got lazy. It'll take you to the story. So as an exercise, what that does is gives you practice in linking, tagging, transcluding, listing, and templating. Which, if you ask me, is kind of cool. That you can do all those things and build that. So that's the whole exercise. You can go as far and as fancy as you'd like. This will be we're going to do another one on Thursday where we're going to play with Wikipedia text, but this is like the last thing where you're sort of doing stuff by rote without any particular object in mind, just to make sure that you can do it. And then you're going to start building your own texts once we get there. But this is a set of skills, kind of builds on all the skills you've built in the first 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And we'll close down with a good set of skills moving into the next exercise. So good. So James will